Hello and good evening everyone to the fifth webinar at IBAC. Today's webinar topic is USA's experience in implementing Building Energy Code, and it will be presented by Cosimina Penetti, who is the Vice President of BCAP, which is the Building Codes Assistant Project. Cosimina supports BCAP's internationally recognized efforts to assist US states and local jurisdictions in enacting and implementing strong and effective building energy codes. She has more than 20 years of experience working in different aspects of building energy engineering in both the private and public sectors. She supports BCAP's mission through advocacy, technical assistance, outreach, and coalition building. She has led numerous educational workshops, testimonials, and energy code advocacy presentations throughout the United States and internationally. Her efforts to support public and private stakeholders have resulted in far-fetching acceptance and awareness of the value of energy-efficient building codes as good public policy. She is a certified energy manager, business energy professional, and certified sustainable development professional, accredited through the Association of Energy Engineers. Cosimina is also a lead accredited professional and holds a bachelor's degree from the State University of New York Institute of Technology. I'll hand over to Cosimina. The presentation would be for about 45 minutes. After that, we will have question answers. You can submit the questions by the question dialog box in the webinar. So over to Cosimina. Cosimina, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
We can hear you too.
Can you hear me, and can you see my screen?
Yes, I can, and all the attendees can. So thanks a lot for accepting to make this presentation. Request you to start the presentation.
You're very welcome. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for that nice introduction. BCAP has been around for over 20 years, and I'm excited to be a part of this organization. We're a nonprofit organization located in Washington, D.C. primarily, but we have staff, satellite staff located across the country. And our mission is to reduce the energy consumed in construction and operation of buildings by working with national, state, and local governments and other stakeholders to promote the adoption and implementation of building codes and standards. And a little bit about some of the, let me see, I'm not able to move my screen to move to the next.
You can try the arrow keys.
Yeah, I'm trying the arrow keys, so hold on. Yeah.
And the mouse key is also, pressing the mouse also is not working?
There we go. Thank you. So I will talk about a little bit about BCAP's services and programs. We're a very unique organization. There is no other organization in the country, in the United States, that is solely focused on energy codes and standards. And with our long history, that makes us puts us in a very good position to develop programs to support energy codes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of this activity that you see here in this list. I hope I can get to most of it. But first, a little bit about the history and the benefits of energy codes in the U.S. Codes started a long time ago with the Code of Hammurabi, if you might have heard of, many thousands of years ago. And currently, in this country, we have the International Code Council that develops the I-Code family of codes. About 15 different codes are developed by the International Code Council, the ICC. The ICC was formed in 1994, but it was formed by 3 regional code organizations that had been around for almost a century. And the International Energy Conservation Code is one of the family of I-codes, and these codes are the most adopted and implemented codes in the country in states and cities. The code that we promote, as I mentioned, is the International Energy Conservation Code, the IECC. There will be very many acronyms in this presentation. The IECC is both residential and commercial. The commercial chapter references ASHRAE 90.1 as the acceptable compliance path. And I will give you an idea of how the codes are developed. The IECC is developed by local and state code officials. These code officials are ICC, International Code Council members. There's about 50,000 members in the country, and every 3 years they convene for a year-long process to update the codes, all the codes, including the energy code, through committee and through a public hearing process. And energy codes, as you know, is a minimum building energy efficiency standard. It employs readily available state-of-the-shelf products and practices, and it protects or insulates occupants of buildings and owners from sharp future energy prices, among other things. So just a couple of snapshots here. This is the code hearing with all the code officials that are only able to vote on each proposal, which there are many proposals to update the code. And once the code is updated, it's adopted only by state and local governments via legislative or regulatory process. I want to talk about some national federal activity around energy codes, of which there has only been a few. In 1992, there was the Energy Policy Act, which was updated again in 2005. In the Energy Policy Act, there's a requirement for states to review ASHRAE 90.1 and the IECC every time, not only when it's updated, but when the Department of Energy has given a positive determination on the update. So, for example, yesterday, the Department of Energy provided a positive determination on the 2015 IECC, and that on the residential side, it's a positive determination, and on the commercial side, that the increase in efficiency of the ASHRAE 90.1 2013 is about 8.5% more efficient in its provisions than the 2010. So that just happened yesterday, which triggers all the states to look at their state codes and take action, especially on the commercial code. They're required to take action on the commercial code and adopt that code if it's updated. On the residential side, they only have to review the code, and if they decide not to update the residential code, they have to submit a letter to Department of Energy. There is no carrot or stick around this activity. However, it's been effective to help states to make the argument amongst their leaders and their political landscape to make the argument for energy codes. So it has had some effect, and I will show a map, an old map of 2004 adoption, so that you can get an idea of the progress. Then in 2009, we had some really important activity around energy codes. President Obama put in place the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, ARRA, and provided stimulus funding to help our struggling economy here. This money came with some stipulations that all states had to adopt a building energy code greater than the 2009 IECC and the ASHRAE 90.1/2007. That was one stipulation. The second stipulation is they implement a plan to achieve 90% compliance with those codes. Now, this is the language in the stipulation, 90% compliance. Every state in the country provided an assurance letter. Their governors provided an assurance letter to the Department of Energy that they would do this. So you see on this map, there has been a lot of activity to come up to this standard of 2007 ASHRAE. The royal blue color, I hope you can see this as I see it, the royal blue color and the dark blue color represent all the states that have met this requirement or this stipulation. And there are 3 light blue states that are still struggling to change their policy. In the center of the country, there's a number of gray states, and then you have Alaska and Maine up in the right corner, top right corner, that are gray. And these states don't have the ability to adopt a code at the state level. So we call these states home rule states. And within a state, one of these gray states, you'll have a similar patchwork of colors of versions of the code. And this is problematic for a number of reasons. We highly encourage uniformity of adoption of energy codes at the country level and especially at the state level for a number of reasons. Let me give you an example. At the state level, if you are a builder or a designer and you're designing a building in a city, you step over that city line to another city or county, and you may have a whole nother set of requirements that you now need to learn, and you might need to purchase a whole nother set of books to accommodate these different versions of codes, and it's costly and it's ineffective at the city level to have this going on. At the national level, it's similar. It's a similar argument. State to state, designers and the construction community have the same problem, that there are different requirements in different states. This is expensive to train all of your staff to understand different versions of requirements. And at the state level, it's much more economical to pool resources and to use national training and national tools and resources to level the cost of implementing an updated code or a new code. We have regional groups and regional similarities in climate where the tools can be used that are developed nationally. And this is very important, and to make sure that the code is implemented correctly. Not to exclude the fact that the code is updated to keep up with current practice and improvements in practices in technology. And so we advocate strongly for uniformity of codes and the adoption of the most current available code with no amendments, because the code is developed by a consensus process, and it's a year-long process, as I mentioned, and there's a lot of value in that, and amendments also, for the same reasons, add to the ineffectiveness of a code at the state level. So I'm going to move forward. This is our commercial energy code status as of this month. And we also have a residential code that I know that India hasn't adopted or developed a residential code yet. The map is similar. Most states adopt at the same time the residential and commercial, but some states don't. Some states have a separate process for both of these codes. Now, excuse the color on this map. I found this map late last night. This is a map from 2004. I wanted to give you an idea that states were adopting codes even before the stimulus money provided an incentive. And as I mentioned, the Energy Policy Act of 1992, there was no carrot or stick involved in that, but many states use that because states are moving forward in their energy policies because it's good public policy. So this is the status there, just to show you. There are lots of colors on this map with lots of versions, but at least we had some activity prior to 2004. And a little bit about why energy codes matter, but I'm sure this audience is well aware of the benefits of energy codes. In America, homes and commercial buildings consume over 40% of all the energy being used in the country, and buildings account for over 40% of the U.S. Greenhouse gas production. So it's important that we address the biggest consumer of energy in the country. Energy codes, this is a representation from American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, put this together a number of years ago, to show that 40% of buildings where the code would apply to the uses in residential and commercial, and about 56% of that usage is covered by the energy code and the provisions in the energy code. Obviously, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, water heating, and lighting. The energy code is thought to be the most effective way to get energy efficiency in all buildings because it applies primarily at the time of construction. It also applies with renovation and remodeling. But at the time of construction, it's thought that it is the most important time in a building's life for energy efficiency. Once that building is built, it becomes costly and sometimes just infeasible to build back in the energy efficient provisions into the building. And so you're stuck with that building for 50, 100 years. So it's a very important time in the life of a building, and that is when the energy code applies. So it's thought to be one of the most effective ways to get energy efficiency in buildings. In the last 20 years in the country, we have price volatility, we have continued import dependence, we have a continued instability of imported energy producers. lots of attacks on coal, which is relatively new in the sense that it's well known now. It's in the news all the time that we need to address this issue of climate change, and coal is the main culprit. So a lot of attacks on coal now in the country, and questions about the safety of nuclear energy and about the safety of nuclear waste and how to handle nuclear waste. Cost and reliability questions around alternative energy, and I'll say that that is starting to get much better, and we're starting to see a lot more alternative energy and renewable energy sources here, which is exciting. And then we have the issue of reliability of grid and infrastructure, which is very costly and constantly needing to be updated in the country. Energy efficiency is considered to be the United States' greatest energy resource. The United States saved 52 quads of energy in 2009 due to energy efficiency and conservation efforts taken since 1973. So in the 70s we had our energy crisis, and that's when a lot of this kicked in. This is more energy than we get from any single energy source, including oil. So if we try to run today's economy without the energy efficiency improvements that have taken place since 1973, we would need nearly 50% more energy than we use now. And as you can see, this is more than we get from any single energy source, including oil, natural gas, coal, and nuclear power. And I want to talk about some of the continued and growing support that we have here for energy codes, and it's relatively new. I have a graphic of, this is on our website, energycodesocean.org. The URL is at the bottom of this graphic, just to depict how many stakeholders are involved in the different phases of energy codes. So the circles around the sun here, enforcement, implementation, adoption, and development are considered the phases of energy codes. You can say enforcement and implementation equal compliance, and you can see numerous advocates and stakeholders in this arena. On the outside of the widest development ring, we have the advocates, the model code developers, ICC and ASHRAE. We have the manufacturers industry, the window manufacturers, insulation manufacturers, and so forth. We have regional groups, which I'll talk about a little bit further in the presentation, that support energy codes across the country in their regions. And of course we have the government here in the bottom right corner. The circles that are white indicate groups that are actively engaged in these 4 activities. And then we've created these circles with black in the middle, and those are opportunities for more involvement for these organizations. I will say that 5 years ago, this diagram was not even 50% full of these organizations. So there has been so much more involvement since the ARA stimulus funding came into effect, and also since the widespread acceptance of the climate change phenomena has really put energy codes in the minds of more people here. And so because of that, we have more energy code resources than we have ever before. And one of the things that BCAP has done, we have put together a national energy code collaborative This group is made up of 3 national organizations: BECP, the Building Energy Code Program from the Department of Energy, ourselves, and NASEO, which is the National Association of State Energy Officials, and the 6 regional groups. So we put together this collaborative because we recognize that we have similarities in our activities, and we need to leverage our relationships and coordinate our services because funding is limited, and so we want to be as effective as we can to serve the construction industry and the political landscape. So I mentioned BECP is one of the national groups. You may have heard of them. The energycodes.gov is a website that's very supportive of energy codes in that it's created by one of the national laboratories, the Pacific Northwest National Lab, and they provide software, checklists, technical support, code notes. They have not a 1-800 number. They used to have a number you could call with code questions, but now they have a live online question and answer resource, which is very useful. NASEO, National Association of State Energy Officials, has, again, recently, in the last few years, gotten very involved in energy codes with creating case studies pertaining to code adoption and implementation. They do regular code webinars and meetings, and they have a representatives that bring energy code to the forefront of their membership, which are the directors of the state energy offices. Every state has an energy office, and to some extent, some are more active than others, but we have a really good representation from this organization now of their as advocates. And then I mentioned the regional organizations, REOs, Regional Energy Efficiency Organizations. These organizations do numerous things, including energy codes is one thing that they cover, energy efficiency in general, and they cover a region of states, and we work with them closely to help them with their regional issues in code adoption and implementation. And I mentioned our website, energycodesocean.org. OCEAN stands for Online Code Environment and Advocacy Network, and I think that it is very similar to the Indian Building Energy Code community that was developed not too long ago. That's a wonderful resource for India. And BCAP, this website, 2005 I think is when we launched it, and it is it's sort of a library or clearinghouse of everything energy codes here. And we're currently in a redesign of the website, which you have to do every once in a while to keep up with, making it fresh and as accessible, the data as accessible as possible. So we're working on that now. But please do go visit the site. There's a lot there, and we welcome feedback on the website. So I'll shift a little bit to energy code compliance now, because this has become a very important issue. This is always an important issue for us, but since the stimulus funding requirement for 90% compliance to the energy code, this has become a big issue for all the states. And when this happened, the Department of Energy kicked into gear and said, okay, well, if you're going to have to be 90% compliant, how do you show that you're 90% compliant? How do we measure it? So this has been a big topic of discussion and a big area for Department of Energy resources, for funding to develop a methodology for measuring code compliance is a very difficult thing to do because it is complex. The code is very complex, and there's a lot of moving people, moving pieces to code compliance. As you saw from the code universe diagram, there's many entities involved in code, not to mention that the code elements are complex because every element is affected by multiple parameters and scenarios, so it's not a simple thing to comply with the energy code. It can be complex depending on the building, of course. So adoption is not effective without proper implementation. That's obvious, but for many, many years, adoption was the sole focus of even BCAP, of our organization. Now we have more support for implementation here than we ever had. Numerous studies show significant non-compliance rates, and non-compliance results in massive lost energy savings. This table on the right shows some percentages of compliance rates across the country. This was taken from studies in 2005. And the issue with these numbers is that none of the methods for measuring in any of these states was the same. So we're not comparing, we can't compare one state to another because the methodology is different. Department of Energy recognizes this issue, and in 2010 piloted evaluation methodology that was done in 9 states. However, even in that pilot study, there were many variations on how the state executed the evaluation. So even with all of that work, we couldn't compare we couldn't really say that this is a true number. So, and for other reasons as well. But what's important is, from all of this work, the Department of Energy is now coming up with a refined compliance methodology that is going to be implemented the same across a number of other 6 states in the coming 2 years. Are going to use this new methodology, and it's a learning process. But it's very important that we can say you have reached 100% compliance, or you have this far to go. Let's see. On the subject of compliance, BCAP started some groundbreaking programs around compliance. We implemented a program called Compliance Planning Assistance, CPA. We created state-based compliance collaboratives, and we created a program called the Energy Code Ambassadors Program, or ECAP. And I'll talk a little bit about each of these, starting with the CPA program. This is something that was never done before, based on the stimulus money requirement, originally funded in 2010 to assist 15 states. And the way we approach this is every one of these 15 states had a very comprehensive gap analysis report created that looked at all aspects of energy codes, adoption and compliance, mostly compliance, but just a comprehensive view of everything in that state that would affect the compliance of energy codes. And with those gap analysis reports, we then created strategic compliance plans, which states then could take forward and start to work on. To date, since 2010, we have completed these activities in 23 states. Here's a map of showing the states that are involved in the CPA program. And each of these compliance plans essentially has a similar typical plan flow chart at summarizing the activities. And so I just wanted to mention this because I feel that this hits upon all of the main issues with compliance in this country and probably elsewhere. At the top of this page, you see primary actors, focus areas, critical tasks, stakeholder outcomes, and end goal. The primary actors to implement this plan is the Energy Code Compliance Collaborative, or coalition. And this is a state-based organization that takes it upon itself to work the plan. And the goal is 2017 to have high compliance. We're saying full compliance. We're not saying 90% anymore. And the focus areas that are presented are certainly funding, state and local policy, outreach, training, and evaluation, which, again, the methodology is still being refined for that. And the outcomes: policymakers support the code, consumers expect and demand the code, professionals build to the code, and officials enforce the code. So those are our outcomes to get that full compliance. Let me see. The primary actor I mentioned is the Energy Code Compliance Collaborative, and this is so important because often in the past the activity of energy codes fell upon one agency in the state, and even though usually there is one agency that may lead the collaborative, may chair these groups, it still becomes more effective to have all the stakeholders at the table to bring their perspectives and their concerns about energy code compliance and how it should be implemented in each state. Every state is very different in their political structure and in their culture. It's different in different places of the country. So this, we felt, was really important to help states establish these collaboratives, and we've done 8 of them so far, help them get started, and we have put together a network of the 8 collaboratives, or we have a webinar every year, and we have a newsletter that follows the activities of the collaboratives. It's essential that this is state-based, but what's wonderful for the national collaborative, the national and regional groups, once a state has this compliance collaborative, this becomes the nexus of activity of all things codes in that state. And we have a place to bring our resources to. So that is definitely a positive aspect of having a collaborative. And what else can I say about a collaborative? It's a collective voice on code issues. Let me move past. Come together to explore common interests around energy code compliance. And they move the compliance plan forward. So they take on activities, they form subcommittees and working groups to take on activities of the strategic compliance plan. The plans, I want to mention, are not static documents. The plans are always evolving as things get done, as issues come up. They need to be fluid and flexible. So the plans are a very fluid document. I want to mention that. And then finally, the Energy Code Ambassadors Program is another groundbreaking program here that just initiated within the last 5 years. And this program is through the International Code Council and BCAP. We started it together, and it's geared to code officials who are members of the ICC. And this program certifies code officials in they have to be certified to be members to be a code official. You have to have some certification and continuing education requirements. This is an additional certification for code officials that have special interest in becoming the mentors for their profession on energy codes and energy efficiency. And what's been really positive about this activity is that they're the boots on the ground, but they provide that peer-to-peer exchange. So we've found that training is much more effective when you're receiving training from your peer who understands your issues and your challenges of your profession. So this has been very well received, and to date we have it implemented in 6 states. It's evolving as we move forward. In Ohio, in one of the states here, we've implemented an incentive program for ambassadors so that we provide an honorarium when the ambassadors go out and do this one-on-one plan review support or on-site inspection support, or they'll go and speak at a conference. We provide them with an honorarium payment to do these things, or we give the payment to their local building department to allow them to go out and do those activities. So it's a very exciting program, and I wanted to mention it. And now I want to shift gears a little bit and get into the a little bit of more of a detailed activity in code compliance, and that is, how do we comply with the code? And I wanted to mention the performance path in particular. ASHRAE 90.1, as you know, has a couple of paths that you can take to show compliance to the Energy Code. We promote the use of the performance path because we believe it will result in a higher performing building. That's basically it. We can't get there using the prescriptive path, and I'll talk a little bit about why I think that is true. The performance path allows designers, design professionals, to target energy efficiency measures where they have the greatest impact for the least cost. It facilitates compliance with increasingly stringent codes and encourages creativity and innovation, not constrained by the specific component requirements of a prescriptive path. It lets investors have some idea of how much a building will cost to operate, and it works towards the eventual goal of net zero emissions in buildings, and that is a goal of many organizations, including ASHRAE, AIA, and the U.S. Green Building Council, and numerous design and construction firms have signed on to this 2030 challenge, which aims to make all new buildings net zero energy by the year 2030. So we feel that we can get there with the performance path. Back in this blue box, back in 2011, the American Institute of Architects, AIA, surveyed numerous practitioners and determined that 57% of projects were using energy modeling in the design process. We think that we probably should resurvey now. We think that it's much higher than that now because of the improvements in energy modeling software. And then another note here is interesting enough that some states have higher use than others. In California, 100% of their multifamily new construction uses the performance path and energy modeling for compliance and design. So either paths you take, there's more than just these two paths. You have to meet some minimum mandatory requirements. Another positive aspect is that this last bullet places responsibility for energy considerations on everyone involved in the design process, and I believe this is so important, and this is why we continue to support this path. I won't read all of this but I wanted to mention that ASHRAE has requirements for software that you use. It has a short list of approved programs: DOE2, Energy Plus, Energy Pro, eQuest, but that's not an exhaustive list. So they do give you some parameters around the software you can be using. And this is a graphic showing some of the changes that have been occurring. Not that long ago, all we had was DOE2 and Energy Plus, and I guess that is showing my age a little bit, but very happy that when we started getting help with the complexity of the engines. So we have eQuest and Energy Gauge, OpenStudio. These are all free GUIs, and GUI is Graphical User Interface, the GUIs. And so you have some idea of what's out there, and some of these are free and free software, and some of them are not. Some of them are private, but the interfaces are getting much more sophisticated, and I think this is a big plus for the architectural community. What I can say about this? Just another table with the software listed and a check mark for where it applies, where it's good for early design modeling, good for detailed analysis and code compliance later in stages, and OpenStudio is free. Some of them are free, and you're probably familiar with most of these products. So again, appropriate modeling at every stage of design will result in code compliance, but more importantly, a building that uses good design as well as efficient components to save energy, time, and money. So in summary, I want to take it back to the beginning of this presentation, that there are many benefits to energy codes, some of which are listed here: lower energy bills, more comfort, good for the economy, good public policy, reduce the need for more power plants, reduce the water usage by power plants, which water conservation is another big topic in this country, less reliance on imported energy, and of course reduces air and water pollution. And I hope that this presentation really came through with my biggest point, that option does not equal saving, but implementing a strategic compliance plan does. And I look forward to your questions, and I appreciate your joining this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Cosmina, for such an insightful webinar, and the way that you presented it and lucidly. I think you have covered a very complex topic in a very easy way. There are lots of questions which we have received, and we'll forward them to you right now so that you can answer. Those who have some questions, you can please use the question dialog box. You can go to the view and questions, and you can type the question, and Cosmina would answer it, not by text, but she will answer it by speaking it out. So Cosmina, I'll send you the questions. Just a moment.
Okay. All right, so let me see if I can open this. The question is the code mandatory for new buildings only? If so, are there any projects for existing buildings? Yes, no, the code is not only for new construction. It covers remodeling, renovation, additions, and retrofits. So we like to say anytime you pull a permit, so you have to have a permit to do any of retrofit work. If that work affects any of the provisions of the energy code, then you need to comply with the energy code. I hope that answers your question. What is a realistic target for 50% compliance for ECBC? I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Maybe, is this a realistic target, 50%? I think you need to shoot for 100%, and that's what we're doing. I think that the problem, the challenge that we face here is going to be a challenge anywhere, and that is, how do you measure it? So that 50% compliance is going to be a factor, is going to be dependent on how you're measuring it. Do I think it's realistic that we get 100% compliance? Yes, I think it's realistic, and I think it's essential that we get 100% compliance with the code, because the code is just the minimum. It's not, it pushes the market, and we have to push pretty hard to move that market to net zero energy if we're going to have these high expectations. I hope that helped that question. Next question, in a complex built environment where the priority is to build faster, how do you think code ambassadors can be of help? And I like this question, because I think to provide a certification program for a specialty, that you have people on the ground that specialize in nothing but energy, or primarily energy, I think that can be very important in the process. And every state in the country here, really every city has its own process. So this is very complex, because you have to work at the city level or the county level to understand the process and understand how to interject energy in an existing process. And I think a code ambassador would be the perfect person to be able to make that analysis at the local level. So I would highly promote a program such as the Ambassadors for India. I think it would help in the process. And yes, it's complex when you're building fast, but I think it's not impossible. I think it's totally doable if you have the vision, if you have the vision and the idea that you want to do it. And that's what we've done here with our ambassadors. I hope that helps. And I'd love to talk more about how to do that How can I join the organization for the same purpose at the starting level? Do I need to learn software by myself and then approach the authorities or else? Okay. How do I join the organization for the same purpose at the starting level? So, do I need to learn the software by myself? If you're a design professional, there's a lot of training available for understanding software. And sometimes it's expensive. I know here that I always look for the training that's subsidized as much as possible. We have some incentives that are in place here to get people trained on design software. So I would first look for the training that's available in your area. And some training is available online as well. And you could look for, internationally, you could look for online training for software. And there's also certifications available for design software through the Association of Energy Engineers has available some certifications for software users. And I'm not sure what organization you're referencing here for the same purpose at the starting level, but if you're referring to the Building Codes Assistance Project, an organization such as ours for India, I think that's a really interesting idea, and Pradeep Kumar and I will be talking about that, I hope, more in the near future. How do mixed-use buildings need to meet the code? In the code, the ASHRAE 90.1, the way mixed-use buildings need to comply is that the use area complies to the requirements for that occupancy, that use. So, in other words, if you have a building that is partial residential and partial commercial, the residential requirements, the area that has the most square meter would take precedent in the requirements for insulation and windows and so forth. But each area will have its own requirements for lighting. So those are available within ASHRAE 90.1. It specifies residential lighting and different areas for lighting requirements. Let's see, I'm not, I want to see this question, but I'm not, here we go. No? Is that all the questions? Because I'm not seeing any more questions here.
There are questions. I think you need to scroll down. There are a few more questions.
I do not am seeing any more questions. Can you tell me the question?
Okay, let me see. So, did you answer this? What are the market incentives for commercial buildings to opt for building code?
What are the marketing incentives?
Yes.
We are just starting a new program that targets design community, to engage the design community in their responsibility for performance of buildings. And it's a complex issue because sometimes here the designer, the architect, designs a building and stamps it, and then that building is they're completely out of the picture. So the responsibility then falls to the developer or the construction manager, the contractors. So it's a complex environment. However, we're trying to build a program around the responsibility of the architectural community to the end product of their design. And it's a very complex issue, but we feel that it's beneficial for a design firm to be able to capitalize on energy efficiency in their promotion of their products. So it's a matter of education and engagement of that community. I hope that helps. We do have some resources on the Ocean website around how to better engage the design community with and what those incentives are. I do see another question here. Why even in the U.S. we don't have a 100% compliance rate? Correct me if I'm wrong with the statement. If the code is mandatory, in theory, it should lead to 100% compliance. How do you balance the carrot and stick approach during initial years? So there's multi-parts to this question. I will say that why don't we have 100% compliance? I would say that it's a matter of resources at the local level, because in some places we do have very high compliance and we have very conscientious construction community. We have a lot of high performance builders, a lot of people that are doing way better than the energy code is the minimum. Energy code is the minimum. So it varies. It varies. And so we're trying to look at those best practices and bring them and transfer that best practice across the country. It's complex because in some places in the country they have a whole different structure for their tax base. So you might have one state or city that has a very robust tax rate and a lot of construction, and they're able to hire staff to do enforcement, and there's a lot of economy there, and so you'll have high compliance rate because they have the staff and they have the resources. And then you have other places that do not have enough staff, do not have enough resources, and even though they have low compliance rates, they still don't have the staff to manage enforcement, and it does affect the construction community. So we're also working to determine what is the best ratio of enforcement by construction rate. And once we make that determination, we bring these things to the forefront and make people aware of their compliance rates and how things are going, I think that we're going to be able to change that environment and get that higher compliance across the country. So I hope that answers the question. It's, as I said in the presentation, it's a very complex topic. It's a very complex issue. So we do have a 100% compliance rate in some places, but it's got to get better. And the code, yes, if the code is mandatory, then in theory it should lead to 100% compliance. I agree. And some code officials, if you say to them, we need 90% compliance, they are very offended because they say we are code officials and we don't enforce to 90%, we enforce to 100% of the law. And we love to hear that. But in other places, we hear officials say, I have to focus on health, life, safety. I cannot focus on energy. I don't have enough time and enough resources. And so we need to change the attitude and the awareness and kind of a cultural change across the trades and across the industry that energy is health, life, safety of the planet. That's one of our mantras, and we're still working on it. We're still working on it. So balancing the carrot and stick, I think that we need more stick on energy efficiency, and because we have federalism here, it's very hard for the national government to impose regulations on state government. It's difficult, very difficult, and it's at the state level. It's difficult for a state to impose regulations on its citizens. So I think it has to be a balance of carrot and stick. And I hope I'm not running out of time here. I know that it's a little over an hour.
We have some
Do we have any
questions. Yes, I've just sent you a question. It is, what was the time duration taken to get the codes implemented in those 23 states?
What was the what? What was the what?
How long it took to implement the codes in these states, 23 states?
Oh, to implement the code. I think you mean adoption. How long is the adoption process? Maybe?
Yeah, I guess.
The 23 states refers to the CPA program, the Compliance Planning Assistance Program, and in those states they had already had a code adopted, different versions of the code, and the program focused on the infrastructure and improving the infrastructure for compliance. How long is it taking for them to implement the compliance plan? It's taking the whole full 5 years. The plan goes out to 2017. So most of the active states are, it's evolving. So and once you reach 100% compliance, you can't stop. You have to continue to keep all those activities engaged and in balance, and so this is going to be a continual job for all of us.
I think there's several questions, Cosmina, but we'll take one last one, and then I'll request the other attendees to write you email for further questions and follow up. This question is, what are the efforts at local level being taken by them to bring the change in government officials?
At the local level?
Yeah, so basically, how do we bring in change at the government officials at the local level?
At the local level, yeah. We have done a lot of work at the local level, and I think it starts with education, that you have to find the opportunities, or make the opportunities to educate everyone involved. So you have to get in front of people at the local level, bring them resources. Look on OCEAN, look on the IBECC website, look at those resources and try to make them available for the local governments and the construction industry at the local level, because many times people don't know that these resources are available at all. And so I think education first, bring the resources to them, create events where you can speak in front of their associations or in front of them individually, and think about all of these programs, that would help the local situation, including the ambassador program. I think that might be something that would help to address this question. But it's not a one silver bullet approach. It's got to be multifaceted. So I think that's how you have to approach it.
Thanks, Cosmina. There's several more questions. I'll email them to you, and then we can probably post them to the participants or put it on the website, because we are already running out of time.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, and I really appreciate you patiently answering all the questions. We'll be hosting this webinar video online for those who could not attend it today, so that they can attend it later on. And I again thank you, BCAP, Pradeep, and all the participants for making this a very successful webinar. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Good day.
Good day. Bye-bye.